In the heart of a bustling square, a black royal guard stood tall, his polished uniform gleaming under the midday sun. Tourists snapped photos and children marveled at his unwavering composure. But then, from the crowd, a voice cut through, a taunt laced with ignorance and disrespect. The jeers grew louder, drawing attention as some laughed, while others looked on uncomfortably. Yet, the guard remained motionless, his dignity unshaken. What happened next left the crowd stunned. With a simple, profound act, he turned the moment on its head, silencing the heckler and shifting the atmosphere entirely. This is the story of resilience, respect, and the quiet power of grace in the face of adversity. Stay tuned to discover how one man's unyielding pride in his duty left an unforgettable mark, proving that true strength often lies in how we choose to respond. The crowd watched, uncertain of what might happen next. The heckler, a middle-aged man with an air of arrogance, stepped closer, smirking as he hurled more comments designed to provoke. People whispered among themselves, some uncomfortable with the escalating tension, while others seemed unable to look away. The guard remained statuesque, his gaze fixed ahead, as if the insults didn't exist. But beneath that stoic exterior, there was a story, a reason for his steadfast discipline and unshakable pride. This was no ordinary role. Becoming a royal guard required years of training, sacrifice, and a deep sense of honor. For him, this wasn't just a job. It was a symbol of perseverance, of proving his worth in a world that often underestimated him. As the man's taunts grew louder, something shifted in the crowd. A ripple of unease began to spread. People were starting to question who would break first. The man's taunts echoed louder now, drawing even more attention. Some in the crowd looked away, embarrassed for him, while others fidgeted nervously, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. A young woman nearby whispered to her friend, "Why doesn't someone stop him?" But the guard remained still, his expression calm, unbothered, as if the scene unfolding before him was nothing more than passing noise. Yet, this wasn't the first time he had faced such treatment. As one of the few black royal guards, he had endured stares, whispered comments, and the occasional bold insult before. Every moment had prepared him for this one. It wasn't just about standing his ground, it was about showing the world the power of restraint. The heckler, emboldened by the guard's silence, stepped closer, his voice sharper now, demanding a reaction. Around them, the crowd grew restless, sensing something deeper at play. Why wasn't he responding? Would he? The man's words had turned sharper, dripping with frustration as he tried to provoke the guard. The crowd grew uneasy, the once curious glances now filled with discomfort. Some murmured among themselves, debating whether someone should step in, but no one moved. It was as if they were all waiting to see if the guard would finally break his silence. A child tugged on her mother's sleeve and asked in a small voice, "Why is he being so mean?" The mother, avoiding the question, shushed her, her eyes fixed on the scene. The tension was almost unbearable, every passing second making the silence more powerful than words. The heckler, now mere feet away, smirked as he leaned closer, his voice loud enough for all to hear. "Say something, won't you? Or do you just stand there like a statue all day?" His mocking laughter rang out, but the guard didn't flinch. The crowd held its breath. Something was about to happen. Just as the tension seemed unbearable, a new voice broke through the noise. It was deep, steady, and carried an undeniable authority. "Enough." The crowd turned to see an older man stepping forward, his eyes locked on the heckler. His demeanor was calm, but there was something commanding about him, someone who had seen and experienced far more than most. "You think silence means weakness," the man said, his voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. "Look closer." He gestured toward the guard, who still hadn't moved. "That's discipline. That's strength. Something you clearly know nothing about." The heckler hesitated for a moment, caught off guard by the unexpected challenge. But instead of backing down, he scoffed and turned his focus to the older man. "And who are you to lecture me?" he sneered. The older man's response came quickly, his tone unshaken. Someone who knows what respect looks like, and you're not showing it. The crowd shifted, sensing the energy of the moment change. Eyes darted between the guard, the heckler, and the mysterious older man. The silence that followed was deafening, and yet it felt like the air was charged with anticipation. Something was about to give, but no one could predict what would come next. The crowd watched in silence as the older man stood firm, his gaze unflinching. The heckler, now visibly uncomfortable, tried to muster another retort, but his words faltered. Before he could respond, the royal guard did something no one expected. He moved. In a deliberate and fluid motion, the guard took one step forward, breaking the invisible barrier of stillness that had held everyone captive. Slowly, he turned his head, his eyes meeting the heckler's with a calm intensity that spoke volumes without a single word. The guard raised a gloved hand and pointed to the insignia on his uniform, a symbol of honor, tradition, and service. The heckler's face reddened as the realization seemed to dawn on him. This wasn't just a man in a uniform. This was someone who had earned his place, someone who represented far more than himself. The guard's silent gesture silenced the heckler more effectively than any argument could have. But then came the twist. The older man turned to the guard and with a slight bow said, "Thank you for your service." His voice carried respect, but his words carried weight. The guard nodded subtly, his composure never breaking, and stepped back into position. The heckler, now the target of the crowd's judgmental stares, muttered something under his breath and shuffled away. The tension dissolved, replaced by quiet admiration for the guard and the unexpected intervention. The crowd slowly dispersed, many glancing back at the guard, who stood tall once more, a symbol of resilience and quiet strength. And as the square returned to its usual bustle, one thing was clear: dignity in its purest form doesn't need words, it speaks for itself. As the crowd drifted away, the square seemed quieter, almost reverent, as if everyone was still reflecting on what had just happened. The royal guard, now back in his original stance, remained as steady as ever, his presence commanding without a single word. The older man lingered for a moment, his eyes studying the guard with quiet respect. He gave a final nod before walking off, disappearing into the flow of people. Meanwhile, a few onlookers whispered among themselves, sharing admiration for the guard's composure and the powerful message his silence conveyed. For those who witnessed it, the moment wasn't just about one man standing up to ignorance. It became a reminder of the strength in restraint, the dignity of staying true to oneself, and the power of actions over words. The heckler's voice was long gone, but the impact of the guard's calm defiance lingered, inspiring everyone who saw it to think a little differently about what true strength looks like.